Hey, welcome. We are.
We're live everywhere.
We just got off Instagram Live and jumped over to YouTube Live.
I think we're off there. Anyways, it's asking me something. I don't even know. Share to IGTV. Do we want to? No, we don't want that. No, don't do that. I think if I delete the video. Okay. Hi, everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us. I feel like I'm just catching up to myself right now. But that was fun. Going live before we're live.
It's good. Yeah, we're trying all kinds of new things. We just went live on Instagram to get ready to go live on YouTube.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we are ridiculous. but everything about this time is ridiculous.
It is. It's good to name it and laugh. Yes. I gotta say though, I did not have a lot of laughter in my day today. I had one of those like the walls are closing in on me days.
Yeah.
I got up for a walk. I biked to the church tonight in hopes that would sort of shake some of the stuckness off.
So what was the deal?
I don't know. I just get bored. I was just kind of annoyed and agitated, when you're like, I eat in the same place I'm working. I'm looking at screens all day, just sort of feeling.
I do understand that.
I was just kind of feeling stuck.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking about that theme a lot because one of our episodes coming up for Between Sundays, we're calling Stuck, which we think is really great. So maybe I was just kind of aware, like, yeah, there are some moments in this weird time where I feel stuck.
Cool.
But I biked over. After party is a highlight in my week. So hopefully it's a highlight in other people's week. Where are you going? Okay. How's everyone doing tonight? We would love to hear from you. Let us know how our sound is, what you're noticing in the live.
I'm back in my seat.
In the live experience
there
here.
We go. I just adjusted some of the exposure a little bit. It was a little bit off.
Perfect.
Hopefully our focus gets back in. Oh, well.
Yeah. But we'd love to know how other people are doing. Let us know how you're feeling today or
let's talk for a little bit, and then we want to ask some questions of people who are watching, get some feedback on what's happening around church and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, totally.
Let's do that.
So why don't you check in? I just said how I was feeling.
Yeah. It's funny when you were talking about that. I was thinking of my daughter. I posted a picture on Instagram. She does not want to be put down at all right now. And I can't get this focus in the camera, but she doesn't want to be put down at all right now. So Rachel holds her about 20 hours a day.
Wow.
And I hold her about 3 hours a day, and she cries about 1 hour a day.
Oh.
But as long as you're holding her, then everything's great. Like
she's happy.
Yeah, she loves it as long as she's being held, it's kind of
nice. She's like making up for lost time.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
A little bit.
Although she got more time. She's born premature. She's had extra time to be held.
You're right, she has.
Come on, Em, chill out, all right?
Come on, Em. But it's doing its work for her though. Like her little cheeks have really they just look like little chubby, healthy baby cheeks.
She has definitely filled out to a normal chubby little baby now. It's crazy. She's great. She's doing really well. The pediatrician's really happy the way she's growing. But it is crazy when you look at photos when we first got her. To now, just how resilient human bodies are.
Oh, right.
The fact that she's
they're meant to thrive.
Yeah.
Like give the body what it needs, and it is meant to thrive.
Seriously, it's quite incredible, actually. So
it really is.
So for everyone who's been asking, Emma's doing really well. She's growing really well. If you check my Instagram, there are some photos of her there. Yeah, she's really cute.
So cute. Yeah. So cute.
So and she's got such big eyes. That's our favorite thing right now. So big. Big dark eyes.
Yeah.
Really cute.
So cute.
But other than that, in terms of check-in, I think this is the first week where I've started to be just a little more, I've had more time. We haven't been quite as busy, and starting to process a little bit of the sort of being sad about not being in the room and doing church the same ways. It was kind of, to be honest, it was kind of fun for a few weeks to sort of pretend we were making a TV show and record all these videos and stuff.
Well, you're incredibly entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And that kind of startup, ooh, we got a new challenge. Yeah. What can we throw at it? What can we try? I think there is a lot of
and I really enjoyed
energy
that
to
in some ways for that first month. And I think this was the week, as I was writing the sermon and getting ready, just thinking, I'm a little sad about I'm just gonna sit in my office and I'm gonna do the sermon instead of being in front of an audience, and not so much the audience, but just like not reacting to what's happening. Like I'm gonna do this on my own rather than being able to sort of see what's happening and engage. I think it's one of the things that maybe I didn't recognize at first, but now that I've done a few more sermons this way, I realize I write a manuscript, I have it ready to go, but I'm realizing how much of the performance of it is like seeing what's happening and interacting with people in the room. Where now I'm not doing that. I'm just looking at the camera, and the camera just looks back at me, and you just go through your material. Yeah. And you put work into the sermon, you put work into the material, so you're confident about it. But at the same time, it's like you don't actually know which parts really to dig in on, the way that you could maybe. Because you're just not getting that feedback. And so this was the first week I was kind of like a little bit sad about that. I also had a funeral coming up. And just even like thinking through that, like how do you do a funeral right now? What's that like? And how do you meet with a family to prepare this? And how do you go about all of it? And I have 2 funerals coming up actually. And it felt heavy in a different way this week than it has for me anyway.
Interesting.
So far.
Yeah, it is interesting to kind of check in with people's timelines on this thing. In terms of like cycles of grief, or what is sort of coming up for people, or what barriers are kind of hitting at different times, or returning to, or like, oh, I thought I kind of processed feeling sad. Why am I feeling sad again? Like, what's agitating me? Like, maybe I'm just kind of ticked and I'm just kind of annoyed. Or I think it's helpful for us to be talking with each other about
my son feel. He's always very emotional. But right now it's like he's just up and he's down. It's all over. And Rachel and I were talking about it and just realizing, okay, so this is like there's all these things. There's change in rhythms. There's loss of school and friends and all this type of stuff, and that it just comes out in these sort of strange ways for him, where it's like so much energy, and then like right now the big thing is when we do anything with school that he doesn't get immediately, it's just like. I can't do it. I don't understand it or whatever. Like he has no capacity to sort of fail and try again at things right now.
It's like resiliency's a little thin.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, you understand that, but you're just realizing how everybody's sort of processing in different ways. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, we did a little bit of chatting before turning the cameras on about our lovely after partiers. That's what we're calling you.
Yeah. We need a name for what we're going to call
after partiers.
Like we have the commoners. We can call people that.
Yeah, but the after party needs a different name. It needs something special. Yeah. So that's what you are. And we feel good about it. I don't know how you feel. Yeah, that's right. But we were talking about the people who tune into After Party being a great resource actually for some of the conversations we're having as a team. And so we, in line with what we've just been talking about, sort of resiliency and checking in with ourselves. Do you need to check something? As you keep talking,
I'm going to change something on your mic.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to hit a button. That's all.
Oh. Was it off?
Nope. It's just slightly different.
Okay, great. Better, right?
It's just going to be like a little bit more clear, I think.
Okay, great. Great. So we wanted to have a conversation here, but also welcome the conversation in the live chat now, but also like if what we talk about tonight sort of sparks something in people's imagination or their considerations, like we would love to hear from people. So
we actually last week we tried that a little bit to interact a bit more. I think now it's taken us 6 weeks. We kind of figured out all the technology, how to do this.
And we're not even millennials.
Yeah, exactly. We are old Gen Xers. Right. You're Gen X. Yeah, you're the same age as me.
Yeah, it's my birthday coming up.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Happy birthday.
May the 4th be with you.
So we're not even millennials, let alone Gen Z, but we're figuring this out as we go. So,
right.
But we tried to interact a little bit more, but that's what we're trying to see is like, what questions do people have? What are people engaging with? Yeah. We want to hear a little bit more, because one of the things right now is we don't have the same feedback mechanisms that we normally do on a Sunday. As a team, we're talking about this, that on Sunday, we see everybody, we get a feel for people. Yeah. You're in the room, you get a sense of, did the service connect with people at a like at a heart level, was it meaningful for them? And right now we're in this kind of time where like we don't really have any of that.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah, other than a few messages we get, which we're really grateful for.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were going to ask some questions of whoever's listening, see if they want to give us some feedback.
Right. And what we want to kind of have some conversation around, you've used this term a couple of times. It's a term I'm familiar with. But what does it mean to have an experience of church that isn't just about what you consume? Like differentiating between some of those parts of like our larger culture that we're in and what it means to be the church within this culture. So yeah, take some of that where you'd like to, and I'll jump in.
Well, I mean, I think part of what's interesting about this period is some element of church, at least the production that we make and we put together on a Sunday. Because I mean, that is part of what we do. There's a rhythm and there's a liturgy to that, and we create that every week. So some of it is consumption. People come, they watch the service, they consume that service, and then they decide what they want to do with that on the other side. But we've always tried to make commons to steer away from just being purely about you come, you consume a service, you go home. Like we want to build community in. Right. Well, I mean, I think there is something about, first of all, I think we live in a culture right now where there's so much out there that's available to consume that I don't know that that's all that compelling. Like there's so many talented singers and musicians in the world. There's so many incredible TV shows. Like, can we really create something that competes purely on a consumptive level? I don't think we really can.
Right.
What we can create is an experience that you participate in and you contribute to, and that you feel like you have this, not just this emotional connection to, but this, I don't know what the word would be, but contributive aspect to. Like, I'm part of this. I'm part of creating this. I'm part of what unfolds on a Sunday. That has shifted now because of the circumstance where we sort of have a very small team of staff and volunteers that are creating the service and putting it together and packaging these videos and putting them up online. I think one of the neat things was Easter, where we had moments of everybody in the community sort of sharing their videos and actually contributing to creating the service. And I think the response to that moment, both in the ways that people wanted to be part of it, but also everybody watching, I think that was that sort of callback to, oh yeah, this is church that's beyond just a thing that I watch and a thing that I consume.
Right. It sort of moved the perspective, right? Like, I'm not just there to listen to Scott or Jeremy or Bobby. I'm also one of, even if I wasn't in the video, you know, if I'm attending Commons semi-regularly, I now know, no, I'm one of those people, which I think is real. That was a really important.
Yeah. And I think that's the piece that it's like, okay, so how do we continue to do that?
Yeah.
Part of that is, you know, hey, like literally videos and stuff that we create on Sunday, but part of it is, how do we have conversations, maybe here on YouTube, but also during the week in Zoom chats and all this kind of stuff, just saying, hey, like, what is working right now? What do you need from church right now? What does that look like? Is good content, provocative ideas, is that what any of us really need right now when everybody's making podcasts and YouTubes and, you know, throwing stuff up online? Or is there something more communal that we can create, and how can we create that? And I don't know. And I mean, that's what one of the interesting things is. We're trying to figure out how we learn about these things.
Yes. Yeah. It makes me think a little bit about, I mean, you did youth ministry. I did youth ministry.
I did. I have a youth pastor story on Sunday.
On Sunday,
you do? Coming up. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I don't have very many youth pastor stories.
Yeah. I mean, I probably have some, but not like crazy.
We used to, here's a youth pastor story.
Okay.
We used to have
not the one for Sunday.
No, not the one from Sunday. A different one. They only have two. I'm telling one on Sunday. Here's my other youth pastor story.
Okay.
When I did junior high ministry, which was my favorite, by the way. High school kids, you had to work too hard to pretend you were cool.
I know. I also did junior high stuff and loved it.
And I was not cool. You know, so it was like junior high was just like, this is an adult. He like is interested in me.
And if you understand where they're at developmentally, you're not fighting against them. You're like, oh, you're just like flailing. Like I'm on board with that.
So I was all over that. But we did have the top 10, which were these rules that everybody had to follow in our junior high program. And it was like, rule number 1 was like, respect God and respect yourself and respect your neighbor. And, you know, there's you know, all these things. But number 10 was no touching Pastor Jeremy. That was a rule. that all the kids had to learn to abide by.
They didn't like fight against it and try to like touch you though. Like it was like a challenge.
It was like a real, like there was some rules that were kind of fun. And then there was like, number 10 is like, no touching Pastor Jeremy. So don't put your grubby little junior high hands on my hands. Don't get them dirty. Like I was ahead of my time, Bobby. I was.
Oh, I'm with you. I was
anti-COVID before COVID was a thing. So.
That's so good. What I was gonna say though is there was this moment, I think, in like youth ministry philosophy where we were moving away from like just get them in the building to entertain them to like, what does it mean to build meaningful relationships that sort of travel with students, through difficult seasons. So I think there's something about that, those kinds of consumption questions, entertainment questions that like, we can't really compete with the kind of entertainment that kids could access.
And now you're competing with YouTube.
Yeah, I know, right? In people's homes, you don't even have to leave your home.
Like it's so funny though, because like when I was a kid, it was like Transformers was awesome. Like that cartoon, but also the movie, Transformers, the movie, 1986.
Yeah, there's something that happens to you when you talk about Transformers.
So exciting.
It's like accessing something in you. I don't know.
Something deep inside me. Pearl Jam and Transformers. But my son, like all he wants to do is watch these YouTubers. It's really hilarious, actually.
He does love them.
He does love them. So we made some more videos this week of playing Frisbee in the backyard. Same thing. Hey, Dad, film me. Everyone, put a comment in the like below. Like, is it just videos for us in our backyard? But he always tells everyone to leave a comment.
So funny. He's got like a liturgy of YouTube memorized.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so back to our question around like spirituality and community in church in this particular time, when what we're doing as staff, as a team, is like creating all of this content and asking questions every week, like, is this as meaningful as we hope it is? Is this enough to maintain the engagement of the people that have filled these pews in this room for years? Is as our routines have totally been thrown and turned upside down, is it enough to have a rhythm and a routine that's based on your screen, like for certain hours on a day? Yeah, we're just asking all of these questions and sort of wondering about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of comments in here. I've been enjoying watching this format because you're talking to each other in person, which is interesting, just to like sort of vicariously live through conversations that aren't scripted the way that a Sunday is. I mean, a Sunday is crafted in a very particular way because we're trying to move people. Well, we're trying to move ourselves through a liturgy that's very ancient and find ways to update it. But you're moving through a progression, and it's meant to take you somewhere.
Right.
That is a very beautiful thing. But there is, again, to this comment here, there's something really beautiful about that sort of unscripted type of conversation as well. Yeah. That normally this is what would be sort of happening in the lobby with hundreds or 1,000 people over the course of a day.
Right.
And now it's just you and I, which is a little bit of a bummer. But I mean, it's that same type of free flowing. Yeah. Maybe we got a bit of an idea of where it's going, but let's be honest, we don't really know where this is going.
I do a little thinking about it. Jer walks in 10 minutes before we start and says, "What are we going to talk about tonight, Bobby?"
This is true.
But our plans have worked out okay.
Yeah,
it's true. I the one Instagram thing I watched today was I love Bon Appetit. Like
you talk about that one a lot. You like that one.
I really love what they do on YouTube. Okay. I like what they're doing in this moment. I like the personalities a lot. I like a lot about the interactions between these Bon Appetit personalities. But Carla, one of my favorites, I use her cookbook. It's great. She was talking to Rick, who's like quarantining in Mexico. I think that's his name. I'm less familiar with him.
Because they like using Zoom and back and forth.
So they did like, how Kevin does living room worship and introduces. So they were like split screen. Cool. I have no idea how people are doing that.
Yeah, I don't even understand how that works. Only Kevin understands how to do that.
And Carla at Bon Appetit. But I realized as I was watching it, I'm like, they're not telling me anything I really care about or need to know, but I couldn't turn it off because I was like, this is a real conversation. It's not scripted. I'm really enjoying just watching these two people I feel like I know, but I don't. I felt a little less alone today just watching two people have a real conversation.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see.
Yes. Ashley says, yes, it was Rick. I love Ashley, you always know the things. You know the things. Anyways,
so I mean, anyone else, it's in the chat. What's meaningful for you right now? And I'm not just talking about things that we're doing here at Commons, although if there is, let us know. But rhythms, patterns that are meaningful for you. And it can be Bon Appetit. It can be things that have nothing to do with church. I mean, the sacred is not confined to just the stuff that we give these ladies.
Say it again.
But I mean, it's so true. I mean, that's something.
Say it again.
The sacred is not confined to the things that we give that label to.
Right.
Everything is sacred. These are things that we talk about regularly here at Commons. Now, there is a time and a place for a particular type of sacredness or a particular naming of the sacred.
It's like I read and care and love the scriptures so I can see the scriptures. Right. Like the word of God in the world. I'm more able to like spot the divine because I'm well acquainted with the story of the divine. I think that's very true about our experience in the world, right? What you're saying about the sacred, that when what I've absorbed in my like life of church going has, I think, made me a more whole person to encounter God outside the walls. But it doesn't mean I want to abandon what's within the walls. Right. It continues to like shape me in ways
and we sort of have this misconception. I mean, sacred, I think, is really about sort of the naming of those universal themes of life that are woven through everything. So everything is sacred in the sense that everything is alive and we're participating in all that. There are moments when we're able to name these things in a particular instance. So like resurrection at Easter, we name resurrection and the resurrection of Jesus, capital R. But then the sacredness of all life is the fact that, every spring the earth resurrects. And, in our lives, we have relationships that, fall and even die for a season and then they come back to life. Right. And so the naming of the sacred that happens here in a room, at an altar, in pews, in a church is what then allows us to see the sacred in everything else. Right. So it's not to say at all, when I say everything is sacred, it's not to say there's no point in specifically sacred moments like church. Because as I was saying, that's what enables us to see everything everywhere. The problem is then when we take that concept and we flip it to, well, these things are actually sacred in the sense of being set apart for God, or where God is present in unique ways, and everything else is secular in the sense of it's just normal, or it's boring, or non-sacred.
I remember just like breaking up with that word and the division. It was the division that I was just like, I'm done with it. That language isn't helpful for me. I'm not interested in saying that is secular. Right. And this is sacred.
But isn't, so I totally get that. Yeah. And I think I use it in different ways now, but at the same time, I think there is something, like I find in my preaching, I find there's something really powerful about saying, this moment is sacred, or this emotion that you feel is sacred, or this thing that you've gone through is sacred.
Yeah. I also love that language.
Yeah. And it's not, and it's an interesting dichotomy, because I'm not trying to say that is sacred as opposed to everything else. Right. But the naming of it and the using of that language actually can be really powerful. Yeah. If we use it in ways that broadens our awareness, not closes down our awareness.
Exactly. I think that was always my interest, is that I love the language of the sacred, and I just lost interest in language of the secular, and just because it seemed like that was always narrowing and looking to like assume that God wasn't in places. Yep. And I thought, I'm going to assume God is in really surprising places. So I'm going to dismiss secular. I'm not saying that the word needs to die. Just in terms of how I speak about the experience of the divine, and I'm going to continue to hold and move through and open up this idea of the sacred.
So I'll give you something. I think secular actually can be a really beautiful word when we talk about secular as the normalizing of things. Okay. So John Cobb, who's a theologian who I like a lot, who's a process theologian, who we brought up process theology a few weeks ago, and we have not gotten back to it. Right. Sorry, Daryl, who asked us to do a follow-up on process and open theism. And if you have a question about process theology, put it down in the comments.
And then Daryl will
I'll answer it right now.
Video. Yeah. That's what we're waiting for.
What Cobb talks about is the secularizing of Christianity. And he means that in the positive sense of the themes.
Yeah, okay, keep going.
Just the themes of the Christian story, the themes of resurrection becoming the normative language of our culture.
Right.
Now, there can be a downside in that, because things that become normal, again, they lose their sacredness, and then they can lose their meaning.
Yeah.
But there can also be something beautiful about taking sort of like the image of the divine being in all human beings. When that becomes secularized, meaning everyone in culture agrees to the idea that we are all divine.
I think that's happening now.
I know.
Right? In terms of like our global commitment to care about especially vulnerable people around. Like, we've never been in a moment like this where we could be like, yeah, I'll stay home. Yeah, I'll lose money.
So can the sacredness of caring for the vulnerable be secularized in the sense of the society now begins to adopt those things? That actually becomes a really interesting and beautiful idea. So the sacredness is what reminds us of those moments where we name something true. The secularity of it is that idea now permeating out into all of our conversations and becoming normative for us. But you need that sort of constant cycle back and forth, because if you don't talk about the sacred, it becomes secular, and then it becomes normal and boring, and we lose it. So you have to name it as sacred again, which reinforces, you know, the secularization of it. But it's this two ideas playing back and forth with each other, and that's where I think it's a real problem when we create the dichotomy. So there's sacred or there's secular. But we can do the same damage when we start saying, I'm not going to use this word. I'm not going to understand the beauty in one another. And I'm not blaming.
I like your argument.
I was just going to say, I'm not pointing that at you. I was
referring to another period in my life.
But that's what I'm even talking about as well.
No, it's really lovely.
In my life where language has meant certain things, and then I've come back around to it in new ways.
No, that's really lovely.
So.
In fact, one of my ideas for our next journal project is a series where we're doing some of these like both ands, less like either ors. So taking like sacred and secular and on a Sunday exploring that and bringing it both and rather like doing some of the work around themes like that. So it's teaching 2020.
So this is an interesting thing is right now, this is the period every year where we plan the journal for September to come out. It feels a very strange time to be planning, you know, the next 12 months of teaching. I mean, we're going to do it because that's part of our rhythm. And I think it's actually, I think it's actually, it's grounding and it's healthy for us to have those rhythms and to stick with them even now.
I don't want us to go into this whole other year. I want our themes to be big enough for us to encounter them, whatever the situation is.
Totally agreed. But at the same time, this does feel like uncharted waters in the sense of like, how do you plan a year? How do you think that far ahead? And what types of themes and thoughts do we need to explore? Now, part of the beauty of our exercise with our journal project is a lot of what we do. If you don't have a journal, send us a note. We will mail you one. I actually delivered a few around the city after we mentioned it on the after party a few weeks ago. But if you look at your journal over the last 6 years, there's been 6 iterations of it. Every year, there's a Words of Jesus series. It's anchored directly in the direct teachings of Jesus, so not just the gospel. So that was our Sermon on the Mount series this year. There's always an Old Testament narrative. So we pull something from the Hebrew scriptures and we work our way through it. That this year was Jonah. And there's always a New Testament letter. For the last 5 years, that has been Romans as we've worked our way through them. We're done Romans, so we'll be on to a new letter. But those sort of 3 anchor series, those eat up half a year generally on those 3. And then the rest of the year gets filled in with things like Christian calendar, Easter, Advent, those types of things. And then a little bit of topical stuff that we think we need to address. And I think that is the beauty of this journal project is as we head into the next year, there's a commitment to say, as crazy as everything is, there's still this commitment where we're still going to go to the words of Jesus. We're still going to go to a New Testament letter. We're still going to go to the Hebrew scriptures.
Yeah, I mean,
then we'll fill the gaps.
Our tradition has done for as long as it's been, right? Like you return to the scriptures, whatever is going on. I think the lectionary has made its way through. I mean, how long has the lectionary been around? It's actually not that long.
No, lectionary, I believe, is like 250 years.
I don't think it's that long.
It's post-Reformation for sure. So it's not like
way post.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not in the Reformation.
We're
the
such nerds.
I know. Nerds that actually don't know that much about the lectionary, obviously.
I know.
I don't even know what year they're on.
Is it A, B, or C?
Yeah.
I know I looked it up a while
3.
ago, but
we got our own lectionary. Anyway, so sacred, secular.
Yeah.
How did we get to there? I'm looking at the comments here.
Yeah.
Daryl is hey Daryl, how are you? And he's saying I really
so
like John Cobb, by the way.
I love Daryl. So
John Cobb is a really brilliant theologian.
I don't know his stuff at all. Where's he from?
So Cobb is a student of Hartshorn. Hartshorn is a student of Whitehead.
Okay.
And I mean like a direct academic student did their thesis with them. Whitehead is sort of the father American process theology, which is the idea that God is in process with all creation.
Right.
And
don't go too far down.
No, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole here, but just really quickly. Process theology. Some people think that means that, God is just like us. God's a created being. He's just more powerful than us. That's not what process theology is saying. What process theology is saying is that there is a God who is infinite, but the moment that an infinite God who is unchanging creates something outside of God's self, now God is impacted by that creation. So God has a concrete and a contingent pole. Anything that creates has that. So you have a concrete and a contingent pole in the sense of if you're a painter, you exist, but now you create something. That's your relationship to what you're creating is now impinging back on you, right? There's the you that started, and then there's the you after you create. Right. And that's what process theology is talking about. It is talking about an infinite, unchanging God who has chosen to be in relationship with creation, which automatically means that God is allowing creation to impinge back on God. And so sometimes we have what we call pantheism, which is God is creation.
Right.
Process theology is a form of panentheism, which would say all of creation is an expression of God, right? It's a creative expression of God, but that means it's divine. It's an expression of God. But creation cannot contain all of God because God is still concrete and unchanging and outside of it. And so God has these sort of two poles, essentially creation and God, which are in relationship. And process theologians would say you cannot be in relationship without being impinged upon in relationship. Right. You and I can't have a friendship without you impacting me.
Right.
That doesn't mean that God is now just a creature. It doesn't mean that God is now on the same level of us, just bigger. It's not about that. It's about the very act of creating being so purposeful and so divine that it fundamentally just changes reality, even for God. And that this is something that God chooses.
Yeah.
God's never dependent on creation. God is never needful of anything. God is completely fulfilled in God's self, but God chooses to be in relationship with us. It's quite an interesting way. Now, then Whitehead and Hartshorn and Cobb go into all the metaphysics of that and how we think about Christianity within it, and that gets quite complicated.
Do you consider yourself a process
theologian? No, I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a process theologian. Mainly because my particular theology that I've done at least a lot of work in would not be at that sort of metaphysics level.
Oh, yeah.
It's more around relationship violence, redemption, and atonement. So that's what Girard deals with.
Yeah.
I'm very drawn to some of the ideas in process theology and open theology, which is a slightly different thing.
Yeah.
But I'm very open to it, but it's just not the area that I've spent a lot of my focus in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great.
Okay, there we go.
Andy joined us.
Hey, what's up, man?
So good. So what we were talking about is just trying to gauge what it means to engage our community and faith in this particular moment where so much of what we're doing is about being on a screen and not being in a room together. So we would love to hear from people.
Yeah. So, a couple of things here. Yeah. There's a comment, planting seeds with my church. Maybe it's a cliche. I think it's really beautiful. And again, ties into this whole idea, like creation. You plant something that's now going to impact you back, which is really beautiful. Yeah, and then lots of comments actually about people saying, either or. Yeah. Being really damaging, and either or being the framework that people were given when they came into Christianity or they came into religion. Yeah. And I think, I think pushing back against that both end is a really significant part, maybe I would say, of what we do at Commons and sort of the approach that we've taken.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to see us next year. That's one of my pitches.
That'd be a fun one.
Is that even a summer series or something like that? Yeah. We could. I made a little list. I can't remember what's on it, but that kind of be more explicit with that. with that language of
So speaking of the both and, we're half an hour into this, more than that. We haven't talked yet about the sermon at all. But one of the things I really liked about Scott's sermon is the way that he honored both the voice of frustration that sometimes need to be given voice to in our lives.
Yes.
When we say, I hate you. And the way that can become, malignant and damaging for us. There's actually some themes you're probably going to explore in a couple of weeks in the How to Be Angry series.
Yeah.
But there's that both and of, obviously we know I hate you is not a posture that's compatible with the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that sometimes those words don't need to be said.
Yeah.
Because we need to express the thing that's happening within us so that we can put it out there, so that we can see it, so that we can begin to heal from it.
Yeah, I don't think Scott used this word, but it makes me think about disruption. And like sometimes things really need to be disrupted. There might be a moment where you think, oh man, those words came out of my mouth and like I kind of hate that I said it, but it disrupted something that needed disrupting. I'm hurt. Like that's what that
and I can think of moments in I don't want to talk about them, but no, I just mean like,
that's fine.
Yeah, I don't want to talk specifics, but I can think, I thought about it, but there's moments I can think of in my relationship with my wife where one of us, probably me, has said something hurtful, but it's the thing that I really felt in the moment, and saying it was the catalyst to then talking about it and moving through it. So in a sense, is it ever good to say that? Is it ever compatible with the way of Jesus? Is it ever compatible with love? No. But holding those things inside and not saying them
is so toxic.
Exactly. Doesn't allow you to move through them either.
Yeah.
So I would rather say the terrible thing, put it on the table and say, okay, now what are we going to do with this? Then hold it inside, know that I'm thinking it, and never be able to express myself and move forward. And this is I think the real dichotomy. And part of what we want to talk about in the anger series, part of what Scott talked about in the sermon on Sunday is the issue is not so much the words that we say. The words that we say are the expression of the thing that's in our heart. And if we get into our heads that the most Christian thing to do is to never say the wrong thing, what ends up is we start holding more and more of the wrong things in our heart, which become the things that shape us and become who we are. So a Christianity that actually says, say the shitty thing and put it out there and then deal with it and process it and heal from it, I think is a Christianity that actually helps us become more Christ-like people. And this is the strange paradox of it. But you'll never be Christ-like without saying some un-Christ-like things. Sometimes when you say the un-Christ-like thing and you know it and you acknowledge it, then you actually start to become more Christ-like because you say, now I want to move away from that. I want to distance myself from it.
I mean, we wouldn't have Don Draper and Mad Men if he would have just figured out how to say the things. I don't know why I'm thinking of Don Draper.
So is this where I admit that I didn't actually finish Mad Men?
I'm not surprised.
I know I never finished
you
TV
don't
shows.
Finish things.
Here's the thing. I finish like everything I start except for TV shows.
It is a really quirky thing about your personality. Did you finish Fleabag?
No.
Fleabag!
I loved it. I loved that one episode I watched.
You to finish it.
I know. Like we were joking last week, like my Apple Watch, I close my rings every day.
I was like, oh, boring.
Like at 11:50, if I get the notification, it's like I gotta go run quickly to close this thing. And yet TV shows, I'm like, yeah, it was a great episode, and I never go back to it.
That's it.
I remember I was going to start a rewatch of Scrubs. I think I said that last week. I watched 2 episodes.
Oh man, but you love Scrubs.
I love Scrubs. Apparently, they're doing a podcast. The 2 guys.
That's right, Zach Braff.
Yeah, I need to listen to that. All right, where are we?
Okay.
We've talked about either ors. We talked about process theology. We talked about the sermon a little bit from Sunday.
Yeah.
What else you got here?
My notes. Well, we were gonna go through some of Scott's message, and I highlighted some of my favorite lines and see what you thought of them.
I'm interested to see what you.
What some of my favorites were. I mean, now that I'm gonna pull them kind of out of context, it feels a bit strange. But, so for some reason, I know we've talked about this a little bit here, but again, And it came up in a conversation that I was having with somebody this week, this idea about living resurrection. Scott used that language right near the top of his message, to live resurrection. And I just wondered if we could like move through that a little bit again. Like, what are we talking about when we talk about resurrection, almost like in a metaphorical sense?
What do you mean when you talk about living resurrection?
Well, that's what I'm kind of rethinking in some ways. I often, like, we've referred to the spring, this opportunity to kind of see these patterns of return. And I think that's where I go. But I think there's something else I'm looking for as well when I think about it. I mean, I was thinking about the history of the word as well, in terms of like, I just did a little bit of, thinking through even just, when we go back a period in terms of like the Enlightenment and this separation of like body and spirit, and this sort of, we kind of inherit this idea from the Enlightenment of like, you exit all of the creation, and you sort of like, you're looking for that, there's like more separation, and then thinking about different, what would have been before that? I mean, different ways of thinking about the afterlife in like medieval times was very like, there's purgatory and heaven and hell, and that's a way of thinking about what is next. And even some of the early church stuff, the way that language around Reformation or resurrection really like took shape in those early, like, couple hundred years after Jesus was around. I just was thinking about the history of the word and thinking about the way that we use it, like on the daily almost. You know what I mean? This idea of living resurrection. Yeah. And are we reducing it or are we opening it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, that's an interesting question. I'll have to give that some more thought. So maybe I'll talk. This is how I come up with ideas.
I give you all your good ideas.
I just talk for a while, and then I'm like, I'm going to come back to the other thing that Bobby said.
Right. I do feel like, I mean, thank you for crediting me. I do appreciate it. You were like, what was your video this week? You did a whole video on spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, I just talked about stuff. I was like, hey, listen to this thing that Bobby said. I gave you credit. I was like, hey,
I know.
Bobby brought up this thing and made me think about this.
Totally. But I feel like we use that language a certain way. I think we inherit an interesting history. And I'm wondering if we could do a little bit more work as what we're still like trucking through Eastertide. Like there might be some room for some more conversation. Again, as Scott said it just, when something kind of jumps up and I feel like we could talk about this with continue to open that idea a little
So
bit.
When I think about living resurrection, the things that come to mind for me is certainly that idea of spring and things coming back to life and cycles. Cycles become a big thing, but there's two things that stick out for me. One is this conviction that I hold on to, that I really work to hold on to, that nothing is ever beyond redemption.
Okay, so that's definitely Jeremy Duncan language.
Yeah. So there's no relationships in my life that are so broken that they can't find resurrection.
Okay.
There's no people that I encounter that have so injured me that I should not look for something good in. Now, I'm not saying I do this well, but these are the things that come to mind to me in resurrection. So there's that. The second is, I'll say it this way. I'll say new beginnings. Okay. And I mean, that sounds, okay, that's the thing that you say around resurrection. But here's what I mean by that. And I'm struck by this every Easter when we come to this idea that so much of our language around resurrection is about coming back. So Jesus dies and Jesus comes back to life, or we die and we are resurrected. But the biblical concept of resurrection, as I read it in the Gospels, is this: the risen Christ is a different thing than Jesus. And I don't mean that can go in all kinds of weird ways. But what I mean is Christianity is fundamentally different before and after the resurrection. Christ is fundamentally different. The faith that the disciples have in who Jesus is, what he's here for, what his mission is, what he's accomplished is fundamentally different before and after. Right. And I talked about this, I think, after Easter in the video a little bit, but I started imagining because word of the resurrection would have taken a long time to leak out. What about someone who it took a year for them to hear about the resurrection of Jesus? And they're like, oh, the community is reforming. They go back and they connect with their Christian friends again. And they realize what I used to believe in was a Jesus who was coming to Jerusalem to be the Messiah, to lead us to some kind of political independence. Now what I believe in is a Jesus whose kingdom is unlike anything we've understood, who cares nothing about overthrowing Rome, who loves all people and is not connected to an ethnic politic in the like this is a fundamentally different religion that you thought you were a part of. And that's what I think of when I think of resurrection, is where are the moments in my life, not just where I came back to life, but where I came back to something that was totally new. Like I thought my faith was dead and I came back to it, but it was totally different. I talked about it different. I thought about it different. I experienced it differently. And then the same thing in relationships. So is there a relationship that I thought was dead? Is resurrection, when I imagine that, it goes back to the way that it was? Or is resurrection in my imagination, this relationship with this person becomes something completely new that has almost no basis in the past. It is resurrected into a completely new life. And you end up getting this mixing of these metaphors between new life that we read about all the time in the Bibles and resurrection that we read in the Bible. And sometimes those feel like they're opposite things, right? Like, is new life just a second version of the same thing? Is resurrection actually not resurrection? It's something new completely. And I think, it's that whole new expression of life that's always bubbling up inside of you. So when I talk about living resurrection, that's what I'm thinking about, is where am I aware of ways that I can change, the new person that I can become, how I'm going to think differently, how relationships will change and evolve in new ways. That all to me feels like resurrection, because that feels like life to me, rather than just continuing the thing that I've always known. Like being resurrected in the afterlife better not be just more of me as I know myself, right? Like I want it to be something new. I want it to be something bigger, more beautiful. And that's what I believe.
The other part of the question is, like, we use language of resurrection in this life. And so I think some of the question is like, what does it tell us about the afterlife? Like, what is our imagination for how does resurrection inform my imagination, shape my imagination for the afterlife? And I think that is that's a much more sort of tricky thing to wonder about. But I'm wondering if, we're spending a lot of time talking about it here, but are we missing something when people are holding like real loss? Like there's, the people have died in their lives and they're wondering, like, we keep talking about resurrection, but like they have no encounter with this person that they actually lost. Like, what is our language of resurrection doing for our imagination of death?
Yeah. Because we at Commons, we are still within, we're deeply within that Orthodox tradition where resurrection means some type of, how we language this, I don't know, but a real tangible resurrection, like not just a metaphor.
No,
that Christ came back to life.
Our creeds say.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is the the heart of what it means to be Christian, is to believe in resurrection in very tangible, physical, literal ways. Now, I think the only way you can believe in something that big and that good is to see it in small moments all around you all the time.
That's lovely.
I think it becomes very hard to hold on to the deep truth at the heart of the Christian resurrection unless you're willing to see it metaphorically everywhere.
Right. So it's like if you already sort of see it in the cosmos, it is something cosmic. Like it might be an idea that is true. Yeah. Because it is evidence. Right.
And that's what I think of when anytime we see sort of these core biblical ideas like resurrection occurring in other religious systems, in different humanist traditions, all these types of things. I'm like, well, of course they are. Yeah. Because that's the truth of the universe.
Right.
Like the universe is resurrecting. The universe is recreating. This is what God does. Yeah. So of course, when God shows up in human history, God resurrects,
Right.
because God has been resurrecting since before
Right.
there was a universe to resurrect, right?
Well, that's an interesting thing, right? That resurrection was long before.
Yeah, like there was cycles, in our solar system before there was humans on
Right.
this planet, and there will be long after we're gone, because this is what God does.
Right.
So of course, the thing that God does when God incarnates into our story, is to embody resurrection and to embody life, right?
And I feel like that's part of the story,
right,
that could use some airing.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, next Easter.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. Cosmic resurrection.
Cosmic resurrection, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it can even just help to use, like, to think about our names for Jesus and the Christ, and that can be a helpful way for us to sort of clue into which part of the story we're referring to. So we haven't gotten very far in Scott's sermon. We loved his 90s rom-com reference, 10 Things I Hate About You. People loved it. It was a good time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to 10 things, but great comment here. Somebody say, there's real tension between community truth, accessing the new through resurrection. Resurrection often comes with its own loss of old structure and stability. And this is so important. I think that's part of what I was trying to get at with those idea of those followers of Jesus now coming to the resurrected Christ.
Yeah.
Like so much loss of what they thought they were going to get from Jesus.
Yeah.
Now that's met with so much more in terms of what they're gifted.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there's not loss.
Right. It's not just like a
right.
Yeah.
And so same thing with our resurrection of those who die.
Yeah.
There is loss that's met with, we trust, we hope, we have faith. That's what the heart of our story is, that will be met with even more connection and more relationship and more beauty.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to acknowledge the loss in this moment.
Right.
Those early followers of Jesus had to reflect on the loss of the fact that, I'm not getting the country and the kingdom and the sovereignty I thought I was.
Yeah.
I am getting something more expansive. I am getting something more beautiful.
Yeah.
But pushing the one down is not a good way to celebrate the other.
Right.
And those things can be held in tension, and they can be held at the same time. And, again, I have
both
2 funerals coming up, but this is part of what you're always trying to do when you officiate a funeral. I never want to, I talked about this in the first sermon of the series, I never want to rush someone through. They were a believer, Jesus loves them, it's all good, let's celebrate. At the same time, you want to point to moments of joy. You want to point to the support that's in the room between people. You want to remember good moments. And finding that balance is difficult sometimes.
I think,
but so important.
I think the same could be said maybe in a little bit of a different way, but for weddings. Like,
sure.
You don't just want a ceremony that's like, your life is great, happily ever after, yay! It just sort of feels like life's harder than that. Relationships are trickier than that. If a ceremony feels like really true and beautiful and good when somebody's at least been able to name, like,
I always try to find like one awkward moment to like name one of those things. I just like doing it because it's a way that you can enter a bit of levity.
Yeah.
But you can also name something that we all sort of know, we talk about. I always try to do that in a wedding.
Yeah. Just to like carve out a little bit of space for like the sadness of
Yeah.
that day.
So
which I think is
one of my pet peeves. Do you remember people used to do the candles?
Yeah.
And the unity candle.
Yeah.
You still see it a bunch, but it used to be like really common.
Yeah, it's very much.
And one of the things I hated was you'd always light the two outside candles and then you light the center one, and then people would like blow out the outside ones.
Yeah.
So the 2 candles would represent them, and they'd light the new candles to represent
no
the
more.
And they'd blow these ones out. And I'm like, okay, now you don't exist anymore.
Totally.
There's no Brad and no Angelina. There's just Brangelina. And even that doesn't even work anymore. So, but just like that whole idea. So I was like, I love the unity candle. Of course we can do that, but you must keep all 3 lit. I was like, I don't need to explain it. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to ruin your moment. I just want all those candles lit at the end of the service. So you both still exist.
Has anybody ever looked at you and like blow it out?
Both of you still exist as individuals, and now there's this new thing between you. So, but rom-coms references.
Rom-coms.
You're into that because 10 Things I Hate About You is one of my all-time guilty pleasure romantic comedies. I love that movie.
It's great. I haven't seen it in a long time. I remember my brother watched it over and over and over again. And it's based on like Taming of the Shrew.
It's Taming of the Shrew.
Which Scott didn't mention.
I know. And I mentioned that. It's in my sermon on Sunday because I'm like, Scott didn't even talk about that. This is the Taming of the Shrew.
It's great.
I know, exactly. It's a great film. It's a lot of fun. Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
Speaking of death. That's sad.
And good night, everyone.
Julia Stiles, who's excellent in it.
Yeah, she's so good.
Yeah, and then
there's like the quirky dad too. He's pretty funny.
Yeah, he's very funny. And the other guy, who's the guy who plays the love interest of the sister, who then became famous.
Oh, it is
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yes. That is, I need to return to that movie.
That's a good movie.
I'm gonna get into
that. And Mean Girls.
Mean Girls is good. Yeah. That's a fun time.
Mean Girls are like, that's probably like two of my like chick flick rom-com that I love.
Yeah. Is Rachel on the same page with you on those, or does she have others?
She watches
You've Got Mail.
You've Got Mail and Sleepless in Seattle.
There are many of us.
Yeah. And right now, and now she's watching Harry Potter again, I think. But
nice.
Yeah.
Great.
Kev has a Julia Stiles story. So
you didn't tell it?
He must have told it somewhere. Ashley knows it clearly. What did he tell it to us in Slack?
No, where was
it?
In the live chat.
Was it in a live chat?
We don't even know anymore. That's the problem with this time.
So Kevin, who is our worship arts pastor, met Julia Stiles. He saw her at a restaurant, went up to talk to her, and apparently she was not impressed that he interrupted her dinner.
Fair enough.
Totally.
Fair enough.
Yeah, all right. Sorry, Julia, if you're watching.
Sorry, we're so sorry.
All right, we got one last thing here. What do we got? It's almost 8 o'clock. What do we got left? One last thing.
What do you think Scott was most excited about? I mean, we can't really speak for him, but you at least read the message and talked to him about it before. We heard.
Yeah, if people don't know, our team, we write all of our sermons collaboratively. Collaboratively might be an overstatement.
That is an overstatement.
Yeah, but we
definitely support each other.
We work on all of our series ahead of time. We plan them out for the year. But then everyone who writes their whole sermon and posts it, at least for me to read. Well, we post it for everyone to read, but I read them all and give notes back. And sometimes you can just give me notes on stuff. You should. My sermons would be much better if you did.
There was only one time where I was like, oof, I wish I would have read that ahead of time.
Now I really want to know what that sermon was.
I remember the moment. I'll tell you off camera.
Okay.
One moment, though, in all these years now, I was like, oof, should have read it.
Yeah, should have. That's what I'm counting on. But anyway, so we do that. So I did have a chance to read Scott's before.
Yeah. There were so many things I liked. He has. When I read the manuscript today, and I was like, man, there's so many good sentences. I love words. So I think sometimes when we're listening to these things, like we take care with our words. And if you're just like making a coffee in the other room while Scott was saying some of these sentences, like I think something could have been missed. But I really loved the way he moved towards the harshest critic in ourselves. I found that to be like, I just needed a moment with that idea. It was the kind of sermon that definitely allowed for a lot of personal reflection on our interpersonal spaces. So, in some ways, I don't have a bunch of like big ideas to talk because I just felt like, I kept sort of reflecting on my my harshest words. That word came up again and again in the manuscript, like harsh words. And then this like harsh critic can be yourself. And I mean,
related to that, the one that for what landed for me was when he went to Jonathan Haidt, who I have read his book, and I really enjoyed that.
Myth of Pure Evil.
Yeah, The Myth of Pure Evil, which is from his book, The Righteous Mind, which is an excellent book. But Haidt's concept is that we buy into this myth of pure evil, which is whoever we deem against us, we are able to convince ourselves that person has nothing redeeming about them, which is what allows us to hate someone. Because if we actually sort of evaluated that person honestly and fairly, as a child of God, as a beloved creation of the Creator,
welcome each other as little ones. That was Scott's language. That really stood out to me as well.
And if you can do that, then it becomes really hard to hate. Now, it doesn't become hard. Well, I'm sorry, but we're still able to critique someone.
Yes,
we're still able to say, hey, this is not healthy.
Yeah.
We're still able to have a healthy boundaries and
Right.
say, like, if you continue to treat me this way, I can't have you in my life.
Right.
Those are all still fair game. But the myth of pure evil is this reduction of someone down to the thing that they did to you.
Right. And when we zoom out into the politics of so much right now, this seems very much at play.
Very much. I mean, you look at our politics.
Yeah.
And this is what we're doing all the time.
Yeah.
But that reminder to say no one is their worst moment.
Yeah.
And even if you were the victim of their worst moment,
right,
that is not the totality of that person.
Right.
Now, that can be incredibly hard, even as a truth. There are situations that I can't even begin to fathom what it would be like to experience and then to come out on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But I think far too easily we go to this myth of pure evil, that someone who I deem against me, someone who I deem as wrong, I reduce them down to just that thing they disagree with me on. And I think we have done this way too much in our politics right now. I think we're doing it constantly in our partisan politics, but I think we're doing it. I think we do it all the time, and it's something we need to be aware of. So as a concept, I had read that before, but it really stuck out with me in the way that Scott framed it and led to it as well. And I think that was a good reminder for me.
Yeah. Okay. We are done.
We are 8 p.m.
It's 8 p.m.
Yeah. We talked a long time.
So many good things. Return to Scott's message. It has some real density to it.
Bobby was worried if we'd be able to fill an hour because Scott wasn't here, and she's like, we're going to talk about his message. We didn't write it. I was like, know. It's fine. We'll just talk about whatever.
It's fine. I actually really wanted to call you, Scott.
Oh yeah,
we ran out of time. We just ran out of time.
Oh, we were going to phone Scott.
I know, I had it already. The funny thing about that is that
Do it.
Scott is one of the only people in my life who's like, I'm just going to call you, and he'll just call me, and I'm not great at calling people. Me. Don't call me. That's how I feel too. I'm probably not going to pick up, but I actually really love when Scott calls. So we're going to give him a call, see if there's anything that Scott has to say.
Scott Wall likes to call. Let's see. Okay, I promise we're gonna end this soon, but let's give Scott a call, see if he's here. I haven't seen him in the chat, so let's see. Yeah, Dr. Wall, good point.
Oh, I thought
No, but Ashley just posted in here. He did. He just finished his PhD, which he did mention in the sermon. So exciting.
Oh man,
it's great.
Maybe he's busy. He's got 3 kids at home. It's a lot. Oh, Scott, you're leaving us hanging.
Let's give him one more ring.
Message.
Hi there, you've reached Scott.
Should we leave a message? Hey, it's after party calling.
Scott did finish his PhD. We slowed him down. We hired Scott 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
And then he planted a church.
I know. So we hired him right in the midst of finishing his PhD dissertation. He finished it this week. Scott is a sociologist.
Yeah.
And now he's Dr. Scott. So congratulations.
We're so proud.
That's a good note to end on. We are very proud of Scott.
We're so lucky we get to work with him.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
Have a great week.